Why can you drink milk? It feels like a question we should have answered by now. We haven't. But what we have worked out is genuinely strange. You were built to lose this. Every mammal is. Right now, about 2 out of every 3 adults on Earth cannot do what you can do. Same glass. Cramps, bloating, a ruined afternoon. People were drinking milk for 3,000 years before a single human alive could digest it. And the fix did not evolve once. It evolved at least 3 separate times, on 3 different continents, in people who never met and never could have. We know all of this from rubbish. When milk sits in an unglazed clay pot, the fat soaks into the wall, and then it simply stays there for thousands of years. A chemist named Richard Evershed at the University of Bristol worked out how to pull that fat back out of the clay and read it. His team went through broken pot after broken pot. In the northwest corner of Anatolia, modern-day Turkey, they found milk fat from about 8,500 years ago. Not a legend, not a guess. Grease in a piece of rubbish. There is a second place it survives, which is worse. If nobody ever cleans their teeth, the plaque hardens into a crust. That crust traps whatever was in the mouth, and then it fossilizes. So we scrape ancient teeth, and we find the proteins from their milk. 8,000 years, and they still have not brushed. And then there are the bones, because we can read their DNA now. So something happened to a small number of humans. It happened recently, and it happened more than once. Start with the rule you broke. Every mammal alive drinks milk. That is what the word means. A kitten, a lamb, a baby human, and every single one of them stops. Milk has a sugar in it, called lactose. To get anything at all out of that sugar, you need a tool that can break it in half. There is a little factory in your gut that makes that tool. The tool is called lactase. When you were a baby, that factory ran day and night. It had one customer, and she was always on time. Then you grew. You started eating real food, and the factory did the sensible thing. It closed. Why keep the lights on for a customer who is never coming back? So the lactase stops. The sugar travels through you whole, down into the part of you that is full of bacteria. And the bacteria throw a party. That is the gas. That is the cramp. That is the ruined afternoon. It is not a disease. Nobody is broken. That is the factory setting. Every mammal that has ever lived was built to close that door. You just never got the message. Now go and stand in that Anatolian village 9,000 years ago. These people have stopped chasing animals and started keeping them. Goats first, then sheep, then cattle. An animal you keep is a strange kind of wealth. It is meat that walks itself home, but you can only eat it once. And then somebody noticed the obvious thing. The animal makes milk. Every day. For months. Meat you eat once. Milk arrives again tomorrow. And think about who needs that most. A human mother stops making milk long before her child is safe. Animal milk is food for someone with no teeth, and it keeps coming in the months when nothing is growing. A goat is not really a meal. A goat is a way to get a small child through a bad winter. Here is the problem. Not one of them could digest it. Not a single person in that village. We have their bones. The factory door was still closing, on schedule, in every one of them. So picture it honestly. A man standing in Anatolia, holding a bowl of fresh milk, with a gut that is going to make him pay for every mouthful. He drinks it anyway. So does his neighbor. So does the whole village. For 3,000 years. Except they were not paying for it. Not really. Because they had already beaten it. Without a gene, and without understanding one thing about why it worked. Leave milk alone in a warm room, and it does not just sit there. Bacteria get in. And bacteria love that sugar. They eat it. That is all souring is. Something smaller got there first. The milk goes thick and sharp and sour, and the thing that was going to hurt you is mostly gone. Push it further. Let it split into solid curds and watery liquid. Pour the water off. Press what is left. Salt it. Wait. That is cheese. A hard, aged cheese has almost none of that sugar left in it. You can eat it with the ordinary factory-setting gut you were born with and feel absolutely nothing. In Kujawia, a region of flat farmland in northern Poland, archaeologists dug up shallow clay dishes, punched all over with little holes, about 7,000 years old, fired clay sieves for draining curds. The oldest cheese-making equipment anyone has ever found is more than 2,000 years older than the pyramids. We were making cheese before we were making pharaohs. And this is not some ancient trick we left behind. Most of the world still eats dairy exactly this way. Yogurt, aged cheese, soured milk with a different name in every language. 2/3 of the planet never needed a mutation. They needed a warm room and a little patience. Which brings us to the part that nobody can comfortably explain. The problem was already solved. Cheese worked, souring worked. It worked for thousands of years in every dairying culture on Earth, and it still works today. So why did anything need to change at all? Why did one letter of human DNA sweep across an entire continent, harder and faster than almost anything else in our whole genome, to solve a problem that a clay dish with holes in it had already solved? Somewhere between the Balkans and the plains of Central Europe, one baby is born with a spelling mistake. One letter, in the instruction that sits beside the lactase gene, the line that tells the factory when to close. The letter changes, the instruction breaks, and the order to close never arrives. That baby grows up with the lights still on. At 20, at 40, at 60, milk, straight out of the animal, every day of their life. And nothing happens. That is the entire difference between you and 2/3 of the world. One letter. The obvious answer is that people drank milk, so the milk gene won. But the pots say no. In 2022, a team laid two enormous piles of evidence side by side. Nearly 7,000 fragments of ancient pottery and around 1,700 ancient human genomes. Milk drinking and the milk gene did not move together. There were places dairying hard for 3,000 years where almost nobody carried the letter. Then it showed up late, and then it rushed. So cross that answer out. It was never simply the milk. Their best answer is darker, and it explains everything. On an ordinary day, not being able to drink milk costs you an afternoon. Discomfort, some indignity, nothing that matters. Now take a bad year. The harvest fails. The stores are empty. There is nothing left in the village but the animals and what comes out of them. And now that afternoon is not an indignity. You are losing water. You are losing food you cannot spare. You are already thin. You may already be sick. Two people drink the same bowl of milk in a famine. One of them keeps it down. One of them does not. One of them sees the spring. Most years, that one letter was worth nothing at all. In the worst year anyone could remember, it was worth everything. And the worst year kept coming back. And there is a cost buried in this, which is what makes the answer hold together. Because you do not leave your wealth out in a field and walk away from it. You keep it close, where you can see it. So the animals came in right up against the houses, sometimes inside them. You sleep a few feet from a living animal now. You breathe what it breathes. And that is where a great many of our diseases came from. Measles, tuberculosis, flu. Milk was one thing we got out of living with animals. It was not the only thing we caught. So the people with the most animals had the most milk and the most illness, starving and sick and surrounded by the only food left. That is the year the letter was worth a life. An American geneticist named Sarah Tishkoff went looking in East Africa among cattle-herding families in Kenya and Tanzania. She found people who drink milk their entire lives, using a completely different letter in a completely different place that appeared entirely on its own. Europe wrote it. East Africa wrote it again, separately. So did the Middle East. The same fix invented over and over by people who never met. When evolution invents the same thing 3 times, that is not a coincidence. That is something killing people. Now think about the words we built for all of this. The Greeks looked up at the band of light across the night sky and called it gala, milk. That is where the word galaxy comes from. We named the entire universe after the one food that arrives again tomorrow. And then think about what we called the other thing: lactose intolerance, a failure to tolerate, a defect named like a disorder and handed to 2/3 of the human species. There are clinics for it, elimination diets, a whole supermarket shelf for people whose bodies are doing exactly what a mammal's body is supposed to do. We took the human default and gave it the name of a disease. because the people writing the names came from the one corner of the world where the typo had won. Nothing was wrong with them. Nothing had ever been wrong with them. So, the glass in your hand. You are not drinking that because anybody proved it was good for you. You are drinking it because of a chain of small accidents made by people who had no idea what they were starting. Somebody kept a goat alive instead of eating it. Somebody let milk go sour and tasted it anyway. Somebody punched holes in a clay dish and made the first cheese. And somewhere behind all of them, in a village nobody will ever know the name of, there were years when there was nothing left to eat. And the ones who could keep the milk down were the ones who had children. So the next time you pour a glass and drink it and feel nothing at all, that is not nothing. That is a factory that was supposed to close, still running because somebody starved. And if you are one of the 2/3, if milk has always been something you had to be careful around, something you learned to plan your day around, you are not the exception to this story. You are the story. Your body is doing the thing every mammal that has ever lived was built to do. The rest of us are running on a typo that a famine forgot to take back.